from True North Homeschool Academy. Did you know that your brain gets better at what it practices? Now, that old adage, practice makes perfect, is only applicable if you practice correctly. If you practice incorrectly, you actually get better at whatever incorrect thing you're doing. So practice makes perfect with intention. And I want to talk to you today about 3 ways that you can help your students practice with intention. You know, there's such a idea in the homeschool world that measurement systems and testing are really out of control, and that they just put your kids in a box and then that's their identity. And so we've thrown the baby out with the bathwater. But a good educational pedagogy does include assessment, because you get what you measure. That is a well-established business practice. It's a well-established basic principles of just interacting and getting what you want and goal setting and attaining that which you're reaching. And somehow in homeschool community we've said, nope, we're not going to do that. We're not going to do measurements because our kids were tested to death in public school, or I was. And look, I grew up in the age of standardized testing, so we took a test every year. It was so very stressful. I get it. I completely get it. And ACT and SATs are not much better. They're a 5-hour test crammed into 3 hours. Most kids have never sat down for a 3-hour test in their life. Most of us haven't since the last time we took the SATs either, right? And they're expected to perform and be good at it. So I want to give you 3 ways to really measure what your kids are doing and give them assessments so that they can actually practice towards the skill building and success that you're looking for as you educate your kids. This is an important educational principle. A lot of times our kids are bored and unmotivated because they don't even know what they're working towards. And again, I did a whole YouTube on how to activate key performance in your kids. I'll link it under this video too, because one of the things that your kids' brains need, they need new stimulation, they need a challenge, and they need to know that they're working towards something. So they need clear, measurable, specific levels to hit. But I want to give you some really clear, easy guidelines on how to measure what your kids are doing and if they're actually learning and growing and building the skills that you're hoping that they build while you homeschool. And hopefully, now look, I read a master's thesis on why parents homeschool, and so I read all the literature at that time, which was very limited, but I read everything by John Holt. I read every issue of Growing Without Schooling, and I love the unschooling method. I absolutely love it. One of the things that is really different between when John Holt was writing and now and unschoolers is that a lot of unschoolers use that term to really say, it's not my problem if my kids are educated. They can do whatever they want. And a lot of times, as I talk to parents who unschool, not everybody, but it just means that they're just kind of like their kids live in the same house with them. There's not a lot of education taking place. Now, some people really are unschooling, and what that means is that you really let your kids have a big part of their educational process and they're owning it, and you really resource them to go into these areas of study that they're really interested in. So I love that approach. I love it. And hey, you can go get the Growing Without Schooling issues free online. Highly recommend that you read it to build your own educational pedagogy and knowledge, because they are so inspiring and so much fun to read. Okay, so if you're measuring your kids as they homeschool, which I hope you are, even if you're an unschooler, you have some measurements in place, but here's a couple ideas to help you understand how to measure your kids. Because again, we get what we measure, and we have to make measurement work. If a standardized test doesn't work, if that measurement doesn't work for you, if it's stressing your kids so much that their performance is out the wazoo, then just get rid of it. But like I'll just give an example. In our Latin program, we do use quizzes and tests because Latin has so many moving parts. At some point, we need to make sure that the kids have gotten all the moving parts that come before, because if they don't, they're going to really struggle going forward. Okay, so here's a couple ways that you can measure what your kids are learning. And we use this in Latin too, by the way. Observation. Discuss with your kids what's happening. What are they learning? You can do this with writing, Bible, math, history, foreign language, extracurriculars, gardening. Just have a great conversation with your kids. How are they learning? How's it going? What do they find really super interesting? What just doesn't make sense to them? What is confusing to them? What is What is not working? Now, I had a kiddo, at least one, who he just got to a certain level of math, and he literally cried as a young kid. He just really struggled with some math concepts. I didn't need to ask him because he would come telling me. With tears running down his face, he was so frustrated. He had this huge block in one certain area, and so we were able to get over that. But sometimes your kids will tell you. But if you have a really introverted kid who's just shy and just kind of maintaining the pace, because some kids just do that, they're not really super happy, they're not really super unhappy, they just go along to get along, that's their personality, which is great, then you've got to ask the questions. And I would encourage you to ask a lot of questions in your homeschool, because you want to build this dialectic with your kids. You want to help them understand that curiosity and learning is active and engaging, and they need to start asking questions themselves. But if you prime that pump of asking them questions as they're learning and growing alongside you and with you in the homeschool, then they start realizing that questioning is just a big part of learning, and that is going to stay with them and be something super important to them throughout the rest of their life. I think I've told this story before, but I come from a long line of question askers. My grandpa was a farmer, and he was the head of the Grange for years and years, and super well respected and loved in his community. And my dad was a PhD in psychology, so really different men, but they both asked a lot of questions. And I remember this one time we were at Mammoth Cave, and the docent said, "Do you want to see what black really looks like?" And they turned off the lights in the cave, and believe me, so pitch black. If you've never been in that kind of situation, you literally cannot see the hand in front of your face. And it was a little disconcerting. Let me be honest. I was a little kid. I didn't really love the dark in the first place, and then it was so black you couldn't even tell if somebody was next to you unless they touched you or you could talk to them or whatever. Well, at that point, my dad starts asking the docent questions. So when was this cave discovered? And he could ask questions forever, and he did for what seemed like an eternity. It was probably just one or two questions. But I learned question asking from my dad and my grandpa, who could ask questions about anything to anybody. My grandpa was one of the most conversant people I ever met. He did not meet anybody who was not a friend. He could make friends with anybody. My grandma, on my mom's side, same way. So I was really blessed and privileged to grow up and just be mentored by people who loved other people and asked questions and were great at networking and discovering things. And listen, when you do that, the world opens up to you. Opportunities are thrown in your lap. It's just a great way to live. So teach your kids to ask questions. But this is all part of observation. Discuss what you see happening. It's subjective, sure, it's subjective, but it's very, very valuable. And then teach your kids to do self-assessments. Help them be self-aware of their growth. And seriously, teach them to do this. This is a great study skill and life skill. Help them understand what the problem is and how they're going to know if they've solved the problem. And by problem, I mean, what's the objective? So for Latin, what are they learning? What's the problem they're trying to solve? For math, for English, for science. Help them understand what the skill is that they're learning, and help them understand how to assess if they've learned it. One of the things I think about stopping the feedback loop at that point, I was in an academic program and the kids did that all the time. And so we had one student in our class in particular, she loved to write, and she was a very a gregarious writer. Do those two terms go together? I'm not sure which, but she was she just wrote. So every writing assignment, and we read our papers out loud, we would listen to her writing, and it would always be 2 to 3 times longer than everybody else's papers in the class. Well, her writing style and her grammar were really subpar. And so her grammar was insufficient, and her language was a little quirky, and her structure and her logic were really they were not up to speed. But in that program, there was no feedback loop. So she had self-assessed, but it wasn't actually a correct assessment. The kids would just say, yeah, great paper, because, kids are kids. And really, because there wasn't a feedback loop that went beyond self-assessment and questioning and observation, she didn't improve. Because, again, remember, your brain gets better at what it practices. So if you practice incorrectly, you're actually practicing to be better at being incorrect. Like, we don't want our kids to just keep practicing to be incorrect, right? We don't want them to try out for the basketball team and think if they just rim the basket and it flies out that they're a great basketball player. We want them to know that if they're going to shoot a basket, it needs to go through the hoop, right? And academically, we need to have those same kind of attitudes. We want our kids to shoot the basket, have it go through the hoop. But if they're just rimming the hoop and it bounces out, they've missed the mark, and so have we. Because we are, as homeschoolers, we have determined to be intentional about educating our kids. The second way to help you measure is conversation. And I talked about this a little bit, but this goes beyond questioning. This is trust-based relationships, right? And it requires tough love. So you've got to be gentle but honest, and there's got to be forthrightness with humility. So if you're just telling your kids or your students, hey, that stunk. That was so boring. I couldn't even hardly stand to listen to it. Your grammar is so bad. I mean, if you're just coming with that attitude, and look, all those things might be true, but you've got to soften it, especially with writing. I would say particularly with writing, because writing is so very personal. And every writer or every student, every kid who considers themselves a writer, those words are like their little babies and they love them so much. So when you as an instructor ask them to kick them out, they feel like you've taken something really valuable from them. So having a conversation must be based on a trust-based relationship, and that goes with you and your student if you're doing a co-op or class, but also you and your kid. So trust is important. Now, when kids hit tween and teen years, of course, they're looking for other resources and other people to have input for what they're doing in life. And that might be a good time to outsource some classes where you and your kids are just struggling with this trust kind of thing. I know I had one student, one of my kids in particular, one of my own personal kids, they love to write and they just felt like they were the best writers. So any input, having been, done writing on a slightly professional level at that point, any input I gave her just felt like a serious blow. Like she resented it, she didn't believe me, she was angry about it, she dug in her heels, and it was just really a battle. So she didn't want to get any improvement, tips or helps or grammar, and nothing, vocabulary, absolutely nothing from me. So if you have a relationship with one of your own kids like that, that's a great time to go, who could I outsource this to? Because listen, again, writing is so very personal, and your kids need to know that you're on their team 100% of the time. And sometimes it gets a little sticky when we're trying to parent and love our kids and critique and instruct them on everything. Right? Now, I've homeschooled for so long. We homeschooled for 30 years. So we homeschooled way back when there were not class days and co-ops. My oldest daughter asked me one time, why didn't we do any class days and co-ops? And I'm like, well, because I started all of the ones that we ever were in. There weren't any before that. Partly because we started homeschooling when it was still illegal in many states. So there's that. Okay, so you can do observation. You can do conversation. These are ways to assess your kiddos because you get what you measure, and these are measurement techniques, right? And the third way is using actual measurement tools. And some of those measurement tools are doing assessment tools, like what we offer at the Performance Series test at True North Homeschool Academy. Other tools are things like quizzes and tests that come with a curriculum, like with our Latin curriculum. You can do self-made tests. You can do escape rooms that can be completely gamified. You can make it as fun and interesting or boring and cut to the chase as you need to make it, right? But sometimes we need really clear measurement tools that are really objective, not subjective at all. But I'm telling you, use a combination of both. Use subjective and objective, because that's going to really give you the information that you need. Now, when I was teaching Latin, it would be a lot of observation. I could tell within the first 10 minutes of class who had done their homework and not, just by the questions that I was asking the class. When the quizzes and tests came around, that was usually verified without a problem. So as parents, we need to take those things into account too. We should be assessing and having conversations and observing our kids in between whatever tests and measures that we do that are more formal than that, if we choose to do it. I'm not a big early learning measurement tool kind of girl. I think that you can do a lot of really assessing your little kids by just observing and having conversations. I mean, really the task of elementary school, especially K through 3, is can your kids, do they gain literacy, and are they becoming numerically literate? In other words, how do they understand numbers? So you can do that by just observing. You can just count with them. You can do simple adding as you're driving around. You know if they're reading to you or if they can read to themselves or not. You know how well they're doing on the phonics program, and I hope you're doing phonics. And I would play games with it too. Absolutely play games. It's a great way to observe your kids' understanding of the material. As they get older, upper elementary, definitely junior high, and then high school, I would really encourage you to use some more formal assessment tools and measurement tools. And here's the deal. Your kids are going to be measured throughout the rest of their life. If they go into the military, college, university, if they go to the Ivy League or start a job, or start a business, or do an internship, they're going to be evaluated, and some of those evaluations are going to be formal, and some of them are going to be observation, and some of them are going to be conversation. So give your kids experience with all three. They're going to be very important to them. And if your kids know how to manage these tests, even if they don't pass the test, they're going to be so much farther ahead, because sometimes just the way that we interact with the idea of being tested or the test taker can be a test in and of itself. So there's the test and the meta test, right? So just something to think about as you're raising up your kids, because remember that old adage, you're hired for your hard skills and fired for your soft skills. And what that means is that people hire you because you have a certain skill set. You can code a computer, you can speak a foreign language, you can do the math, you can make sales or phone calls or whatever. But if you don't have interpersonal skills, if you can't manage the cranky person who calls you and you're a customer service rep, or you can't handle your supervisor as you're coding the computer, you're going to get fired for that more than your lack of information, because you can learn skills. You can learn those hard skills, but can you always learn those people, interpersonal, soft skills as quickly and easily? And the answer is no, you can't. So help your kids with those skills as they're young, and a lot of that has to do with observation and conversation. Conversation is such a great academic tool. I feel like it's really underutilized. We do a lot of talking in our home. We have a lot of talkers in our home, so it makes it easier. But we like to talk about a lot of things. Theology, history, Bible, science, the weather, arts and crafts, business, you name it, novels that we've read, movies that we've watched. We like sharing and observing and questioning. If you're not even sure where to get started with all of this, I would highly recommend our ebook, I think it's called 5 Common Topics. It must be called that because that's what it's about, 5 Common Topics. I'll put a link in here below so you can grab it. Everything in the shop right now is 5% off for today. And then we have some deeply discounted classes for leap year only. So today. And you can get some of those classes for up to 50% off. And why are we doing that? Because we want you to experience the amazing classes that we're teaching. We are teaching subject matter information as well as those soft skills I was just talking about. So critical thinking, communication, collaboration, and creativity. Those are baked into our classes. We do a variety of assessments, papers, projects, presentations, questioning, observation, and tests and quizzes. And so our kids are going to be well versed as they leave True North Homeschool Academy and go out into the world and launch as young adults. Okay, you guys, if you have any questions, let me know. Make sure you go to truenorthhomeschool.academy and check out our offerings today, because everything, again, in the shop is 5% off, including our already discounted bundles. With the bundles, you can share those among your siblings. So if you buy 3 classes, 1 class could go to 1 kid, 2 classes could go to another, or you could have 3 students take a class each. The only limitation on that is elementary and junior high classes go together, and the senior high bundles must be senior high classes. So you can't use a middle school bundle and throw in a senior high class for it. But the bundles are already discounted. So if you use today's coupon code LAST5 in conjunction with the bundles, you get a total of 10% off. If you're eligible for the military discount, you get an additional discount on top of it. They're all stackable. Some of our classes are filling up fast: Spanish, health, biology, And so if you're interested in those and want a certain section, day and time, you need to get on that sooner than later. If you have any questions, of course, feel free to shoot us a message. Head on over to truenorthhomeschool.academy and start a chat with us. A real person sees that. Or you can shoot us, a Facebook message, or there's the website and phone number on the website. I hope this has been helpful to you guys. Let me know if you have any questions or feedback or what your thoughts are on this. I'd love to hear what kind of assessment tools you use in your own homeschool and how that works for you. Okay, you guys, this is Lisa from True North Homeschool Academy. It's been great to talk to you, and I'll be back later.